Hey everybody, welcome to another installment of Talking Marijuana. We are really excited today. We're going to be talking about one of the initiatives that is looking to get on the ballot in 2014 to legalize marijuana for recreational use here in California. We're your hosts. I'm Barry Kramer. I am the patient operator of California Patients Alliance. We are a GLACA accredited dispensary here in Los Angeles on Melrose. Come and visit us when you're in town if you're a patient.
I'm Yami Bolaños. I'm patient operator for Pure Life Alternative Wellness Center on La Cienega, also a fully accredited dispensary in Los Angeles. And I'm the president and founder of the Greater Los Angeles Collectives Alliance. We've been making the mark of excellence in the city of Los Angeles when it comes to medical marijuana since 2006. And with this is
Sam Humid. I'm with Perennial Holistic Wellness Center, and I'm also the treasurer for GLACA.
Yay.
Yeah,
Yay.
accredited dispensary in Studio City, and glad to be here.
And on the phone with us today from Sacramento, our satellite host, Don Duncan.
Hello, everyone. It's Don, California Director of Americans for Safe Access, joining you from chilly Sacramento.
Yeah, chilly Sacramento, no kidding. And our guest today is David Hodges. He is with MCLR, the Marijuana Control, Legalization, and Revenue Act of 2014. And I think I got that right because I'm reading it right off the paper. Yes. These acts always have some kind of convoluted name. That's a pretty clear, I think, name, but it's just trying to remember.
Yeah, well, the acronym is easier. MCLR, and the
Clear,
clear
yeah.
wasn't accidental.
I didn't think it was, and it's a great way to remember
Yes, it is.
which one this is. Just for some context, a couple of weeks ago, we had on a couple of proponents of CCHI, the other initiative that is trying to get onto the 2014 ballot so that we can have legal marijuana here in the state of California starting in 2014. So we're really excited that you're here. We had a great time with
Jeanette,
the
Patrick.
other guests that we had, and very excited to hear the differences, what you're going for. But first, let's just lay out the initiative. I think for our listeners that are tuning in, what is this initiative attempting to do, and how is it attempting to do that?
Well, the point is to legalize adult use marijuana, fix the medical laws, and legalize hemp in one bill. That's kind of a lot to do, but what we did is about a year ago, we presented a one-page document to the community, and this was at a conference we held in San Jose called the Safe Cannabis Conference. And we said, hey, this is an initiative that could work. It's one page long. If you don't like it, tell us what's wrong, and we'll change it and move forward. So through that process, and going through this over a year, that document got to be about 35 pages at one point.
Wow.
And then we brought in a professional in Sacramento who, all he does is work on initiatives. He does them for insurance companies, he does them for large firms who want to try to change the law in California, and said, hey, here's our pile of wishes in what we think is an initiative. Help us clean this up and turn it into something workable. So the attorney's name is Steve Churchwell. He took the document, cleaned it up really nice, and that's what we have today. But what we've been doing, even after submitting, once you go through the process of working with the LAO, they review the language in very good detail, give it to people like
The LAO, that is...
Legislative Analyst's Office.
Okay, thanks.
So the LAO are the people that actually review any type of legislation that's going to end up in California law. So going through the process with them, they've highlighted a few things that, actually one of them would have been great for us. We had a accident in there that would have allowed people to have a unregulated, unlicensed grow of 100 square feet per acre. Now, it wasn't intended to read like that, but the way it read when the LAO looked at it was 100 square feet times an acre. So if you just wanted to grow on your 100-acre piece of property, you could have 100 times 100 square feet. So clearly that was not what we were intending on doing. What we've done is, since we have to go through and refile to make sure that the LAO is clear with what we're trying to do, we've given multiple opportunities for anybody else to try to contribute.
We did tell Yami to turn off her phone before we got in studio, but we're good. Sorry, Dave, continue. It's always a good reminder.
So where we're currently at with it is we're still negotiating with the LAO to make sure that it's clear that they understand what we're trying to do and that it implements the law that we're trying to change. But we're also asking for any more community feedback. If there's something in there that you identify and say, hey, this is a deal killer for us and we can make the change, we want to make the change.
So this was, I've been reading the material, and it's considered the first open source legislative initiative. No one's ever done it like this before, where you go, here's one page, you all add to it, now we have 35 pages, we're going to mix that up, now we have 24 pages, and this is our initiative.
It's definitely a unique process, and we kind of went through it because we saw the need in California. You know, the best example was 2012. 2012, we had somewhere around 9 to 10 different initiatives that all tried to get on the ballot.
Right.
And part of the problem was that everybody had their own perspective and nobody was willing to change, right? So
compromised.
What we tried to do is take the best of all the language that's come before, combine it into the document and say, hey, if you're going to complain later and say, hey, this is a bad law, or hey, I don't like it because of this, tell us now so we can change it so we don't have that issue.
Did you find a lot of cooperation? I mean, obviously you did. You went from one page to 35 pages. Was that process messy? Was that process?
It's been a nightmare. I mean, as you might imagine.
That's just the truth, huh? It's been a nightmare.
That's great.
So, you know, what we did is we put this in a Google Doc, and anybody from the internet could edit it. So, as you could imagine, there were times that people deleted the whole document. There were times that people accidentally put in weird things that obviously weren't right. But what we kind of realized out of going through this process is if we could figure out how to do this right, there's a lot of other laws that could probably use it. And that's what we formed the 501c4 that we have for this, which is called Americans for Policy Reform. And Americans for Policy Reform, its goal is to enable the same process that we did with MCLR for anything else.
Excellent.
Because we've got through it once, we figure, you know, if we can figure out how to help other people go through it, it's
set a precedent for it.
Well, it's kind of true democracy, the way things should be. You know, this is the law written by the people, and just because it's marijuana doesn't mean that process isn't valid for other things too. So, you know, it's well, it's been a nightmare. It's been really enlightening, and it was able to produce something that is unlike anything else I've seen out there. So. You know, the other thing that has been called besides open source is crowdsourced legislation, which is another good little buzz term for it. But that's literally what we did. We said, hey, here's a document. If you don't like it, get into it and change it yourself.
How many people submitted into it?
Oh, a lot.
You know, I was watching the progress on Safe to Cannabis. I'm on the listserv, right? And so all the comments and stuff. And my first thought, you know, having gone through the process here in LA and having gathered signatures, and you know, we have the experience we had, was like, oh my God, that's too much democracy. You know, that's too many people. That's too many people with their soup and their spoon in the soup. You know, how is that going to work out? So. Now, having read it and gone through it, I'm amazed.
Pretty well. It's a long document, but
Very
a fairly
long.
Clear document.
Very
in
clear.
What you're doing. Some of the things that struck me in this initiative are the really clear and forceful statements that would protect the medical marijuana patients and the 17, 18 years that they've had this program for them in the state of California. It seems to really separate that, make sure that it's dealt with in a fair way for patient access and patient use. And we're not seeing that in some other legislation around the country. Every state is going to be its own experiment, and I would much prefer to see states moving in the direction that this initiative takes, which is to clearly outline how to protect medical marijuana patients' rights that they've fought very hard for to gain.
Deserve
I
to
would prefer
keep.
this kind of legislation.
Yeah, it's been a little difficult. It's kind of like threading a needle
Sure
because
is.
we don't want to. We don't want to infringe on 215 or SB 420 for a couple really important reasons. The biggest one being that there's going to be a transition period. So if we were to say, let's just repeal SB 420 and 215 and replace it with this new law, well, there's going to be a couple of years there where things are going to be very crazy, like what's going on in Washington.
Right.
So we've done our best to really kind of thread this needle to both protect the medical industry while creating a new industry that will be a lot more regulated and like any other industry.
Right.
And then the other thing that really strikes me about the initiative is that it really is more than just a legalization initiative. You even stated it in your summary. It's almost a three-pronged legislation. It's legalizing marijuana for adult use. It's cleaning up and clarifying the medical program here in I always want to say Los Angeles, sorry, in
clearing that up.
California, and then the third prong of that, I'm sorry,
Is the hemp. So
of course, hemp legislation.
We just passed the hemp bill, and
Yes.
one of our original parts of this document was very similar to the hemp bill. And when they passed the hemp bill, we went back and looked at it. The hemp bill is a great bill, minus the sections that we had to repeal.
And there are many sections in there, like at least 8
There's
or
a
10.
handful,
Yeah.
5 or 6, somewhere around there. But those are the sections that basically said, this isn't going to start until the feds let us, or
Which is
those
kind
are-
of
That actually made it effective legislation rather than just a piece
because we
of
were all
paper.
like, "Yay! The hemp bill passed in California, and we can use it when the feds change their minds. So why do we pass
So
it?" for us?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like-
So in bringing all that up, this legislation does tackle more than, this initiative does tackle more than just legalization, and I wonder, do you feel pressure for that, or does that convolute, even though all three of those are goals that certainly all of us in this room and many people we work for want so strongly: legalization, hemp to be
Hemp,
legal,
yes.
and medical marijuana to be protected, and noticeably different kinds of regulations for medical and adult
for
use.
recreational use.
It seems hard enough to get one of those things done. We've been trying here in California for 17, 18 years to get medical marijuana clarified, and our legislation just doesn't even want to take it up. So in this, you're sort of packing it all in the initiative. Should the initiative pass, we benefit by getting all of this
three, yeah.
terrific...
Right. And probably the biggest concern that you're actually bringing up, even though you didn't state it, is, are we crossing the single subject rule? And that's
definitely.
that's something we've asked a lot of attorneys about. Fortunately, this is all the same plant. So we're really, I mean, if it were cannabis was one plant and hemp was a different plant, then we may have an issue there.
But since they're the same, it falls
Yeah,
under...
and one of the things that's missing in this that we had to remove because of that issue was the release from prison. So that's something that I believe in very strongly.
Yes, of course.
But we actually had the original language from the Jackarere in there at first until the attorneys looked at it and they said, "Hey,
doesn't work."
this is a great idea. We strongly believe in prison reform. These people who are actually working on other prison reform things, but you can't do this. It'll cross over the line." So what we had to
Dave,
do.
it's Don from Sacramento. Is there any polling, or do you have a sense of where the public feels about what would admittedly be a big fight to take when it comes to cannabis reform? Do you guys have any numbers yet, or any sense of where the folks are at?
Yeah, we've done some polling, and it's actually confirmed a lot of the other polling that we've seen out there published by other groups like ACLU and the other ones that have published recent polling. We use Google Consumer Surveys, which is a fairly new product, but there's a lot of people talking about it because Pew Research actually said these numbers add up to the same as ours. So using our Google results, we actually got a 64% yes for 2014 legalization.
Excellent.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and again, you combine that with the other polls that have been released recently, and it adds up to something that we're at the 60% part. Now, the one big thing that we found out through our polling is there's a huge difference between marijuana and cannabis and hemp. Mm-hmm. So when we polled, do you want to legalize marijuana? We got, the question was a little different than that, but
right.
Using the term marijuana, we got 64%. Using the term cannabis and hemp, we got about 54%.
Really?
So there's about a 10-point spread of people. And the other really interesting thing about that is
That's
the
really
spread was in the undecided. So it was yes, no, maybe.
And maybe got bigger.
The maybe got bigger, the no stayed the same, the yes went down.
Interesting. Well, let's take a little break because I want to get into this a little bit and kind of break that down. Let's take a little break. We'll come back and talk about that aspect of it.
Perfect.
Thanks. We'll see you after the break.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FY. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We are talking marijuana, and we're talking marijuana with our guest today, David Hodges of the MCLR. MCLR, it is the Marijuana Control Legislation and Revenue Act of 2014.
Legalization.
I can't even read it right. We're murdering your title. I'm so sorry, David.
MCLR.
MCLR, please remember that.
I think in clear is good.
And if you want to find out more about MCLR, go to mclear.us.
That's it.
mclr.us, and I'm sure there's a copy of
the initiative's
initiative
up there.
is up there. So
through.
Please look at that. There still is. It's still an open sourcing initiative, so you can contribute if you're so inclined. So let's get back to discussing the initiative. Before the break, we were
talking about polling. I was telling you the difference that we saw between just the term marijuana versus the term cannabis and hemp.
I'm surprised at that. It seems like cannabis and hemp are less, threatening to the general public
than
at large.
marijuana.
I mean, you would think that it would get a much higher response, but
it's one of those things in our little marijuana bubble. We look at cannabis as the proper term for the plant. Outside our bubble, there's a lot of people who don't. There's 10% that support legalizing marijuana that don't know what cannabis is. And when you ask them, do you support legalizing cannabis and hemp versus marijuana? They will say, I don't know, but yes to marijuana.
So much education needs to be done in this country. It is almost insurmountable.
And that's also one of the reasons we tried to fix the hemp issue in here too, because we know that, if we're going to have to change that later on, either we'll have to wait until the federal government lets us do hemp, or we need to fix it in this bill.
This initiative is for 2014. There's lots of discussion out there. I won't say many, but there's just lots of discussion out there about whether 2014, whether 2016. 2016 tends to bring out more voters. It's a bigger election. It's a presidential election. The CCHI, the other proponents for the other initiative, their main goal, I think, in their initiative, beyond legalization, which let's just accept is all of our main goal is to legalize this, Their main goal and their answer when we asked why 2014 and not 2016, when possibly more money, more involvement, more energy, their answer was, we have people sitting in prison that cannot wait for 2
Another
years.
2 years.
A very valid answer, but you've just said that isn't quite the legal. There's questions on that.
We'll see where it
So
ends
my
up.
question is why your initiative doesn't seem to work. You've taken out the prison thing, and we definitely want those people out ASAP. But if they're not going to be out with this legalization, why 2014 and not 16?
Well, I mean, there's a few different reasons, but just to be clear, we didn't actually take it out. We just changed it from they shall be let out of prison to we suggest that the legislation adopt things to let them out of prison. So we still have it in there, and what our plan is to submit some cleanup legislation if this passes. So there's about 10 pages that we took out of this because they were literally just changing the law, like to remove cannabis from the Controlled Substance Act, from the California Controlled Substance Act. You have to print the whole California Controlled Substance Act and then put a line through where it says marijuana. So
that was part of what you guys eliminated, so it wouldn't be so long.
So we changed that and said we suggest that you do that, and we have all the language to do it. So we have some people that we can submit it through if and when this passes. As far as why 2014 versus 2016, I don't feel we can wait, and I feel that the vote is here. But beyond that, you have to look at the cost of 2016, the reality of 2016 versus 2014. So in 2014, we have Jerry Brown, we have
Democrats in every elected position that they're.
We have the Republican machine that's pretty beat and battered from the last election. So we've got a pretty good window, and we have the support. In 2016, it's going to cost a lot more. It's also going to have a lot more opposition because you'll have a reactivated Republican political machine, and because it's a open seat for the White House, the advertising rates are going to be higher than they've ever been. So where we can get it done for a maximum of $10 million in 2014, in 2016 the budget starts at $30 million.
Wow.
Well, that's a huge difference.
And it's not guaranteed. You know, when you're talking about an open seat for the White House, a bunch of Republicans who are going to fight like dogs to get everything done, they'll use this issue as a primary attack issue. So, you know, really, we've got a really good opportunity in 2014. And, you know, while there may be more voter turnout in 2016, that doesn't actually guarantee anything. Right. Because for all we know, the extra voter turnout could be Republicans. Versus in 2014, Jerry Brown is going to bring out all his people.
True.
So we've got, when you're weighing all the different factors.
You still need $10 million.
Well,
$10 million. It's a lot of money.
We do have some plans on getting it.
5 on it.
$5 million? Right? Where's the check? Come on.
Really, that's what we're waiting for, is that one check for $5 million that greases us up.
Do you think the fact that Mr. Newsom has organized his little thing to check out 2016 to see, you know, whether or not it would roll out in 2016, is that hurting you guys at all?
Well, at first, the heavy 2016 dialogue was really detrimental to what we were doing. You know, we've been working left and right to get past this. But because of the polling results that have been released, that even Gavin has gone, well, we could see something in 2014.
Right, I've heard him say that.
You know, he was just trying to make a big press splash, and he successfully did. But a lot of the people who were originally talking 2016, now that they're looking at the polling results, they got a foot in their mouth, and they're saying shit. So, you know, unfortunately, if the dialogue for the past year was 2014,
we would have been that much
we would be
closer.
done. There would be no question of money. Yeah. Everybody would have been together, and we could have got it done in California. I still believe that we can get it done in California.
It's just a little bit.
But, you know, to say that 2016 is a guaranteed anything is really difficult.
Right.
And when you're looking at the challenges of the 2016 election, you've got a lot more of an uphill battle than you do in the 2014 election. So,
Well, the ways of change are in your favor right now. There's no reason not to take advantage of that.
Right.
Anything could happen 2015, 2016. People's
Right.
perceptions
absolutely.
could change.
I
Right.
mean, it seems to step. You should step on the gas when you can go forward, and we can go
Absolutely.
forward now. So, I have to say, I'm very glad that there's an attempt to do this.
For legalization in
and I hope
2014.
that there's some galvanizing behind, one of these initiatives for sure. Whichever proves to be more appealing to the people at this point, and can really get its legs up and go. I hope once one of these gets on the ballot, we really get a good rush of support.
Well, I think that's pretty clear, is that once either any initiative gets on the ballot, there's going to be a lot of support for it. I'm attached to this language because we've been going through it for over a year.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody else, CCHI, were to get on the ballot, and we weren't, I'm going to support everything that they're doing.
We
have
felt
to
that
go
all along.
forward.
I think even
No matter who makes it, if you guys
Yeah.
both get on the ballot, I'm voting for both of you guys. I'm signing both petitions. Legalization is a reality that needs to be soon. Yeah,
and
it's
this is
important,
really extensive legislation.
But this could
initiative
pose
that
a similar problem in Los Angeles, where we had 3 competing initiatives in the last election, Prop D, Prop E, and Prop F, all fighting for different things. Are you prepared to have 2 competing initiatives in California?
We are. I mean, unfortunately,
It's the reality.
It is the reality, and the problem with the CCHI language, the best example was in 2012. In 2012 there were 9 initiatives on the ballot.
Right.
So it's fortunately we'll only have 2. But if CCHI was good enough to get everybody on board, this wouldn't exist.
Right.
So we're really hoping that if and when they don't succeed, that we're there to pick up the slack.
Okay. So then in the legislative process then, say both of your initiatives go to ballot. It goes down to the most popular vote then? If yours gets more votes than the other, yours is alone?
Actually, they don't necessarily conflict with each other.
Okay.
So, it would, if they were both to be on the ballot and they were both to manage to pass,
Right.
there wouldn't really be, there's a little bit of overlap, but I don't think it would actually cause any major problems. And again, there's some issues with CCHI as far as like the prison release that will cause some.
Wait a minute, let me say that again, because I know I'm present to DF or EF and D. We knew that we had to get, whoever won had to have 50% of the vote plus 1. And that's the one that would win. So if you're saying that both initiatives are on the ballot and they both win, I mean, there's not a conflict there?
Well, we actually have some language that addresses how other
Yeah, I read
initiatives
that.
work.
Oh.
So,
Yeah,
we actually took that into account.
But
So
that's
it's-
a very long shot of a possibility.
Yeah, the
correct?
possibility of both of them being on the ballot to begin with is a long shot.
Really
and
long shot.
the extra possibility, especially knowing that the poll results that we see show the name that we've tested at 64% versus the cannabis and hemp name at about 54%. I wouldn't expect us to actually see this pass, either of these pass with 54 or 64%,
right,
but
right.
that 10-point spread difference
Gives it a boost.
It's the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah.
Well, and that all comes down to the name. Do you know marijuana or do you know cannabis and hemp? And that was, this has been a really long journey, but we spent a lot of time coming up with this name. One of the original names we tried to do, it was actually based on a suggestion from Patrick Moore, was to name it the Jack Herrera Initiative. And that caused a big
problem because Jack is so connected, or so connected.
It actually wasn't a problem for a lot of the people who control his book and a lot of the people that have, actual IP rights to his name. It was a problem for the people behind the 2 main proponents of the CCHI initiative who looked at it as a disrespectful thing. And again, the only thing our goal was to codify Jack's name into law, a lasting memory forever.
Right.
Which sounds great, but then you go back to the name testing, and if we would have done that, we would have really shot ourselves in the foot because who the fuck is Jack Herrera?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? If people don't know what cannabis and hemp are,
They certainly
You know,
don't know
and
who he
it's
is.
interesting because people forget that, like, all these cannabis things, you know, hemp things, people forget when they're writing things that it's for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, so we read it and we understand it. We know what it means. But a normal layperson will read it and they don't get it, or they don't recognize what it says, you know. They're used to. Yes.
It's Don from Sacramento, and I think you really hit the nail on the head for what it means to have an initiative campaign, is that we always have to think about that much larger majority of people who are not cannabis people and aren't cannabis-identified voters, and you know, what will they line up behind? That's what we learned in Los Angeles, is that we had to have an initiative that appealed to, you know, the NIMBYs and the people who are worried about cannabis.
And that's why we won by 64% of the vote.
Right. Look, I've personally been a big proponent of the word cannabis because marijuana in and of itself is a slang term that was used to degrade the actual plant.
We're on the same page.
But
Don't get me wrong.
that word
You know,
recognition issue that you have to deal with. You know, one of the strategies I use in that regard is I typically use the word marijuana in headlines and sound bites and cannabis and monitor conversations.
That's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, that's a good way.
Yeah, and we kind of did a little bit of that in this initiative too. You know, it's titled the Marijuana Control, Legalization, and Revenue Act, but a lot of the language in there says cannabis.
Good.
So, you know, it's...
Well, that's the way to
Get the name
people to
recognition,
start to know that they're interchangeable, and
Right,
also
right.
that, you know, we can move over to cannabis once we get people on board for that. We talked earlier a little bit, we touched on medical marijuana, and I'd like to, we have about 3 minutes before we go to break, so I don't think we'll be able to really get totally into it, and I'd like to come back after break and really kind of explore that a little bit with some of the actual language that you have in the initiative.
That's actually pretty good because it does protect the patient's
But
rights.
it is a great, I mean, you really, it's, when I was reading this, everywhere that you'd think you'd go, but what about the patients?
Yeah, and
there
then
would
it's
be
right there.
something that said, this is good, except, you know, it exempts patients, or
Right.
it will, you know, patients will be dealt with in this way. And for many of us, that's one of our most important goals
things.
when legalization happens, which we welcome and really
Want.
want, is to make sure that it doesn't come at the cost of the patients who paved the way, and not only paved the way for legalization, but they did it not so that we could have legalization. They did it so they would have access to medicine.
To medicine. And they've earned those rights to use it as medicine.
Barry, I'm glad to hear the second half of the statement, because I think we have to be very careful as the United States moves towards legalization in states all over the country, that remember that medical cannabis is not a stepping stone, it's not a foot in the door, it's not a strategy. And so we have to keep treating it like a legitimate issue. Because I really do feel like a lot of our allies in the broader drug policy movement have sort of dropped medical as yesterday's news, and they do that at their peril.
Yeah. Do you think they're doing that, Don, because it's an exciting time? We've got 2 states that legalized marijuana, and they're just rolling with that momentum.
It is a very exciting time. We just have to remember when we're looking at this that you know, these 2 issues are related and that they deal with the same plants.
Yeah.
But medical cannabis, of course, is not the same thing as legalization.
I don't.
I think we always have to be that sort of voice in the wilderness, to let people know we're not done with medical.
Exactly. And I don't think the patients in Washington are excited at all about what's going on up there.
We'll come back after the break and start talking about the medical aspects of this particular initiative. And let's take a break right now so we can get back and talk about that. We'll see you after the break.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FY. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
And welcome back. We are talking marijuana with David Hodges of MCLR. You say what it stands for.
Marijuana Control, Legalization, and Revenue Act.
Bringing in some revenue for the state of California, which they would like to get, I'm sure. We left off right before the break, just touching on medical, and I'm going to dive right in. There's one section in the initiative. No sales tax or use tax for medical or dietary sales. So cannabis, and this is the language from the initiative, cannabis that is sold for dietary or medical purposes shall not be subject to any sales or use taxes. All taxes and fees on medical cannabis collected prior to the enactment of this act shall be deemed valid and non-refundable under any circumstance. So if we've been paying taxes for that, we will stop, but we don't get any money back from that, which is fine,
right.
whatever.
Well, that actually has to do with a very long story about a lawsuit that I have with the BOE where I'm trying to get them to refund me the money.
Oh, so you want your money back.
If I get my money back and set a precedent for it, then anybody who has not said that they're selling pot and used another language will have reason
Precedent.
to collect their money back from the BOE,
Wow.
which potentially could bankrupt the state or at least cause some. So
that's
actually
careful to. We're moving forward. We're
right.
not
Let's
looking back.
if Dave wins, screw him. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And past this point, let's just start a clean slate where. If people in California don't like to see medicine or food taxed,
Right.
and that's
We've been
where we're
fighting
at.
that here for a long time.
So, in the adult use world, or the recreational use world, tax is perfectly appropriate. If you want to add a sin tax or whatever tax you want to add upon that, we accept that as a society. Alcohol and tobacco are taxed more, but medical and food, if you were to say, hey, you got to pay. In San Jose, people are paying almost 20% on their medicine, right? So if you say you walk into Walgreens and they're like, well, hey, if you want your Sudafed, you got to pay an extra 20% in taxes.
Right.
That's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, it is.
So
It is
21 in
ridiculous.
LA.
So this would bring up problems like they have in Washington right now and that they're trying to deal with, which is, let me just lay it out for our listeners. In Washington, because legal marijuana is coming on board in January, the state liquor board controls their regulations. Kind of a weird thing anyway, but that's who's regulating. And their recommendations are to basically fold the medical marijuana program into the legalization program. It reduces access for patients, how much they can have, how much they're able to, purchase and keep for consumption. It takes away their right to grow. Now, you've protected a lot of that in other language.
Yeah.
However, you still are going to have this problem of, and this is what I am kind of seeing the problem in Washington being, is that Washington State wants the tax revenue. So if you allow for medical marijuana to not be taxed, it gives an avenue for many, many, many people, most of them I would say legitimate, but there is going to be a loophole for people to avoid taxes, and that's probably what the state is going to be upset about. So,
well, and we had that discussion with the LAO. So they've been going through this language in pretty
detail,
pretty good details.
And for the lay listener, the LAO is
the Legislative Analyst's Office, the people that actually review any law that's going to be put on the books in California.
Okay.
So they actually brought up that exact same point, and our response was, well, when you look at this future world. A lot of people are going to want to switch to the adult use, and even in that world, I can see operators who would be willing to give discounts for medical patients and still pay taxes on it. Because what we need is a world where people can pay taxes and feel secure about it. Because what we have right now is hundreds, thousands of people in California who have been paying sales taxes and then got shut down for one reason or another. So what we have is a situation between the work that I've been doing with the BOE, which could be a nightmare for them, and a situation where just because it's so easy and it feels so right to pay your taxes that a lot of people would be very happy to switch over to the adult use and pay taxes, the operators, knowing that they have a level of protection.
Of protection, absolutely. If it afforded protection, I mean, I have to say that's why I charge sales tax and pay my sales taxes right now, because somehow I feel that
you're doing the right thing.
The worst thing to happen and I were to get arrested for doing what I do, at least I have a record that shows I've been trying to be a law-abiding citizen and pay taxes with,
Yeah, it just, unfortunately, in the current law, it's 50-50 on how that's going to work for you. They're either going to say, well, look, you've been doing the right thing, or they're going to say, look at how much money you've made from selling pot. Right? So,
and they always go the latter.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, so I mean, again, it makes people feel good. And it when I started the first club in San Jose, very quickly when I figured out we were going to get shut down, I started paying sales tax, thinking it was the right thing to do.
Right.
And then we got a letter from the city saying that we were a for-profit business and what we were doing was illegal and we had to shut down. So that's actually what started me on the whole, hey, BOE, what the hell is going on here?
Right.
If I'm paying
the
sales
sales tax. The city was incorrect, of course.
Oh, yeah, the city was incorrect. We ended up suing them over that letter and winning, and there's a nice little piece of case law that says cities can't just send out letters like that.
Right. Well, we hear this a lot, including in Los Angeles. People say, "Oh, well, if you sell something, you're not a nonprofit." And of course, my standard retort is, "What about goodwill?" They sell things all day long, and they're a nonprofit. So there's so much misinformation around that, around the what it means to be a nonprofit or not-for-profit, or even a for-profit corporation. So I'm glad the city was held to task on that issue.
Yeah, it was a nightmare, the whole process and going through it. But we did end up winning on that. And as far as the for-profit, non-profit sales, that's. The law isn't really there to say a clear picture of anything. We don't have a law saying it is okay to sell marijuana and pay sales tax on it.
Right.
That's not what the law says. So, given that's the state, who says you have to say that you're selling marijuana?
Right.
And then what the definition of sale is, again, I can talk for hours about the work that I've been doing over the past 4 years.
Yeah, we can talk for years because we've definitely been living that.
Yeah, we've been living that
I've been dealing with the BOE for the past 4 years, so
Yeah.
it's been kind of a crazy journey. But, what we've tried to do in this is kind of paint a picture of the world as it should be moving forward. So, Californians don't tax medicine or food, so that was kind of a given. And as far as the other protections, we wanted to make sure that we didn't infringe on what 215 and SB 420 created, because there's going to be a transition period.
Right.
So the day that this goes into effect, we aren't going to have adult use stores open up.
Right. Just as in Washington. Well, in Washington they sort of did. Dish. But they're not really there yet because they don't have regulations on how to operate and stuff.
So, looking at the examples that we have, we know that it's not going to be an overnight implementation of it. So what we've done is we actually put a grandfather clause for existing collectives. So that
again, another protection for medical patients.
If you have a collective right now that's operating and this passes, you can be secure knowing that you can continue to exist as that collective forever.
Give me a little time out on that. Just to clarify, would that mean that, let's say our situation in Los Angeles is that we have over 1,000 dispensaries and they're all operating. So if they're open and this passes, do they get the go-ahead and then they're just open?
So it supersedes Measure D?
Yes, it supersedes Measure D.
All of this initiative, one thing that I did read said that whatever is in this initiative will, if it applies to this initiative, will supersede whatever law is on the books already.
Yeah.
So basically, in Los Angeles, we could wind up with a permanent 1,000 dispensaries.
If the law passes.
If the law passes.
These dispensaries will only be able to do medical, right?
Right. They wouldn't be able
through
to
the
move
existing
into.
system, which doesn't really give a lot of clarity or protection. So while they may be grandfathered as far as their location, the BOE or another organization
might be able to shut them down
can probably go after them.
Does it grandfather any entity or only legal entities?
We put collectives or cooperatives.
Yeah,
so it's not legal. It's just if you're existing, you're legal.
But again,
let's get Don in just for a second. It's hard for him on the phone. But Don, come on in, ask your question.
Oh, I was just going to say, I wonder if some voters in Los Angeles will look at that and say, "Oh no, we just backed down. We don't want
One second.
Wait,
Don,
yeah,
you're
I
almost
think that-
incomprehensible.
State legislation.
Don, you're almost incomprehensible. Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
That's not the first time someone said that to me. I wonder if voters in Los Angeles might look at creating a loophole suspiciously, because we had an issue recently with state legislation that might have created an extra leeway in Los Angeles. I know our city attorney and some of the stakeholders, including the union and even GLACO, were very concerned about that state legislation. So that may be a battle line that comes up during a campaign is where local control comes into a statewide initiative.
Yeah, and to be honest, there's at least a dozen attorneys who are on the other side of Measure D who have helped contribute to this language. So there definitely is.
They're trying to keep their.
They're trying to keep their dispensaries open.
What
that
we've
are
also
illegally open
seen
now.
as we've been going around talking to everybody, there's a lot of the average voter who are disappointed when they know the reality of Measure D. So the reality of Measure D is that you're going to have a maximum of 135 clubs in the largest city in California. And actually, I believe LA, the counties around it are the top 5 largest counties in the state. So in the area of the state with the largest amount of people, you've got a very small number. Which one of those actually?
In different cities, West Hollywood, San Francisco, there's patient-based, I believe it's like 50,000 per person.
Yeah, well,
50,000 people per dispensary, yeah. And in LA at 135, that's 43,000 people per dispensary.
Well, but that's assuming actual patient numbers. And the way I look at it, not being from LA, but is if 1,000 collectives could exist, there must be a market there for it.
There is, but there's also
But it's
patient
illegal.
ignorance. 135 well-regulated dispensaries that distribute product that's medicinal versus 1,000 competing for the bottom dollar.
Right.
Selling whatever they can, untested mold.
So when you get into the future of how things should be, you'll have very clear regulated shops that fit under our registered businesses in this that would be,
And should those shops not be conforming to the regulations, they will be eliminated. So by a natural process, it would probably eliminate
a good portion of those. And of those 1,000, say if those 1,000 were to continue to exist, as soon as we've got the adult use, you aren't going to have 1,000 of those that aren't going to try to switch to adult use.
Right.
I would imagine less than 10%, if even that, who would want to keep the medical-only situation versus allow anybody 21 or over to walk in the door.
Right.
So, where...
Yeah, 800 or 900 of those dispensaries that exist now would much prefer to have kids over 21 coming into their place legally.
Yeah, and we just have to kind of look in the future of what it's going to be versus what we have now. And I know it's really hard to view what the future is going to be from the battle zone right now, but... just
still have to take that perspective. I think that we, should this get to that point where it has to be, it is inevitably going to be law, then we need to really figure out a way to move forward and go with it.
And we want all of those 1,000 dispensaries to be telling everybody that walks in the door, legalize this.
Oh yeah.
Right. So, it's
okay. That's a whole other discussion. We're going to take another break. We'll come back for our final segment. We'll finish up with you, David, and maybe tap on a few items that were in the news this week. But this has been a great discussion. I'd like to continue it when we come back from the break. See you when we get back.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking marijuana. Our guest is Dave Hodges of the Marijuana Legalization
and Revenue Act.
Marijuana
In clear.
Marijuana Control, Legalization, and Revenue Act.
I tried to do it without my notes, and there I go.
I know it's a tough name, but we pulled that name. That was the best one that pulled. So
It'll get, if it's on the ballot, people will know what it stands for, and it will be very clear to people.
I see.
Yeah, it's and for our listeners at home, if you want to find out more and get involved, if you're in California, please get involved. And if you would like to find out more information, it's MCLR.us. It's up on the screen right now, and please get in touch with them and find out what's going on for yourself. So the last thing I want to bring up on the medical aspect of this was, it seemed to me that you have a section in this initiative that allows for reciprocation with other states.
Yes.
So to continue with my last question, which was, people trying to skirt the taxes by coming into the medical rather than the legal. Reciprocation seems to open the door to that. I love reciprocation. I want to be able to travel to other states and go to their medical marijuana facilities. I know Nevada does it right now. I'm hoping that more states will do it. I'm hoping we'll do it.
Well, we also, we aren't barring people from out of state from participating in the adult use.
You aren't?
Yeah. No.
So
it's not
I guess
California.
whatever you're So I guess.
Right. So again, it gets back to this philosophical debate in California of should food and medicine be taxed, and that has been one that California voters and California people have over said, no. We don't believe in taxing those items. So, we've got, there will be a transition period, and there'll be a period where people, some could say we're skirting the law, but again, the current tax system doesn't have as solid of a ground as a lot of people wish it did.
I only say skirting the law, and it's bad wording for sure. But the only reason I'm saying that is because the governments, the state legislatures, are looking for their tax dollars. Mm-hmm. So I just wonder what that is going to do when they see that people can come from Nevada or come from Arizona right now and untaxed by, if they're a medical marijuana patient in Arizona, come here and get untaxed marijuana, thereby undermining our...
Right, so you're not necessarily talking about our state's collecting of taxes. You're talking about how other states may go, hey...
Because we don't have a national legislation for this. If we had national legislation, it wouldn't matter if you crossed the borders into another state.
Hopefully that'll encourage those states to pass adult use.
I think that's what Washington has gone on to say.
But Washington's kind of closing the medical loophole, they call it.
We're closing it because we don't want people coming from other states. This is one of
their arguments. Own people enough haven't signed up for it, to make any sense with their tax revenue, because that's the whole reason why they passed it seems like. The more and more I read about Washington and the people behind pushing that law and stuff, it was all about money.
Yes,
it's all about money. It had nothing to do
politicians.
with patients at all, and it's so sad because patients, they're the ones that won the right to use cannabis as medicine in their state. And now for them to close the loophole, it seems so unfair. It doesn't, thank God.
Very clearly, it's not, and very clearly is trying to protect it as much as you can.
For us, we don't even see it as a loophole. We see it as people under the age of 21 that are really the biggest problem. If you're a 9-year-old kid who has Tourette's or some other horrible symptom, a seizure problem where a doctor is going to say, hey, this kid needs to have medical marijuana, be it 9 to 19 years old or 20 years old, since we're 21 and over, we need to have access, and that's really important.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of where we kind of came from as far as the protecting the medical. It goes beyond just let's grandfather the club so there's a transition period to the point of if we abolish medical, we're doing a huge disservice to a lot of people who really need it. So it's that's one of the other things that we did in this was reduce the state card. So the state card,
$35.
Yeah, that's great.
right?
Excellent.
So I mean, the state card is the best program that we have. It gives the most protection to the patient. The difference is somebody gets pulled over with the state card, the cops have no choice but to leave their medicine with the person.
Right, right.
Versus without the state card and just the recommendation, it's the cop's choice. Do they want to take your medicine or do they want to overlook it?
And just as a footnote, the state card is voluntary at this
Right.
point and continues to be in
It
your
continues to be voluntary.
initiative.
It's voluntary, but it's in Santa Clara County. It's $250.
Well, I was
per
going to
year.
say, how did you guys come up with that amount? And because I've asked before, like in LA, if you're a medical recipient, it's like, I think it's $75. If you're not, it's $140, something like that. I'm not sure.
It's a lot more reasonable than I've heard some other places.
But so how did you guys come up with that price? I think that's a great price, $35. But when I asked in the past in LA why it was so expensive, they said that's how much it costs to process it. And to do it. So then, if you're only charging the patients $35, then who would pay the extra?
Well, you were a little misinformed on the cost.
Okay.
So I have a very good friend
good.
who works for the health department who let me see their budget. And one of the reasons that we actually originally tried to make it so that, or had some language in there so that the new medical register or medical retail outlets would only take state cards. There was too much of a backlash, so we changed it to state or recommendation.
Right.
But the reason for that was the state has a large debt to pay off from their current medical implementation. That website, it cost them a lot of money.
To cover California?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, the verification system for the cards.
For the cards, yes.
Right. They've been having problems paying it off because the cards cost so much. Nobody wants to get the cards.
Right.
Exactly.
So they have to bring the cost so that they can actually
based on
just
a
cover their
statistic. They
costs.
assume that X number of people are going to register based on the population, and to process those people's, the number of bureaucrats needed to process that paperwork is going to cost XYZ dollars, and that's where they came up with the number. You legalize and aggregate it out to an entire state, the numbers come down because the economies of scale.
Yeah, and when you look at their actual costs, the number of employees in the entire medical marijuana program for the state, we're talking a handful of people.
Right.
We're not talking something where, there's a giant department and 100, 200 people that we got to cover the cost with.
But yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, those will be the adult use, right? So, I mean, that'll be
and we'll have
different.
your own commission.
Yeah.
And
so,
then, there's your own.
So as far as the cost reduction, the price, that was a combination of research. There's some low-income prices that are 30 to 35 in a couple counties. So it can be done. The actual cost of processing is not as high as they say, because I got the same answer when I asked in Santa Clara County. Why do you want people to pay $250?
The state is charging so much money when they don't need to.
Well,
you combine it with the DMV, put a Department of Mary
I know, how much is a license? I mean, how much does
it
it cost to get a license? $10, $20 to get a driver's license or an ID? $10, $50. Why can't be the same?
And that's where we came up with that $35.
That's good.
So this has been a very enlightening discussion on your initiative. I would love if you could come back sometime, because there's other questions. We didn't really even tap into what I feel is the main bulk of your initiative, which is pages and pages of how to set up this commission.
The commission
that will oversee it. And I don't want to get into it now because we don't have the time for that.
Let me touch on it for 1 second.
Please let us know. Yeah.
What we had to do is we had to make sure this commission can't get out of control.
Correct.
Right? Because one of my good friends is Attorney J. David Nick. He wants to be on this commission, and his first thing was, what if I go crazy? I've been supporting marijuana forever, and I'm a big supporter. But what if tomorrow I just flip out and I decide I hate all stoners? Well, we had to have stuff in the commission or in the regulations for the commission to protect us from the commission going wild.
And it is very detailed. The way you guys have set up that commission down to who it's made up of, how they're chosen, what terms they serve for, where the equality comes in. So
it's structured very similar to the Fair Political Practice Commission. So that was kind of the template that came from, which gives us a real bipartisan independent. But again, regardless of how independent and how good it is, we still had to have protections just in case we get a few people on there that go crazy.
As long as Snoop's the head of that commission permanently, I'm
So you'll come back and talk to us about it as things progress.
This has been really enlightening, and as we go forward, and looks like things are going really well for you, we'll have you back. We'll keep talking about it. We'll keep trying to garner support for this. So moving on, we just have a couple of minutes left, and there were a couple of things that came up this week in the news, one of which, Don, I would love for you to let us all know about. The ASA, Americans for Safe Access, has come out with a third white paper now. Am I correct?
That's right. Gosh, third, fourth. It's hard to keep up with them after after publishing so many. But we did just publish one that has to do with the Cole memo. You guys may recall recently that U.S. Attorney Cole, Deputy Attorney Cole, put out a new memo that has been outlining the federal priorities as far as enforcement goes. And so when last this happened, there was way back in first that happened, there was some irrational exuberance on the part of our community regarding what it meant. And so we put out a white paper interpreting the Cole memo, but also pointing out some of the shortcomings of the approach the Justice Department is using by simply publishing memos. And so what we hope is that this is going to be a great tool in Washington, D.C. to talk about federal policy, and especially to talk about how we can get federal policy out of the way of the states and let the states lead on medical cannabis.
Yeah,
so that's our goal, and we also want to encourage folks to download this thing and take it to the district offices in the states and use it as a way to have a conversation with elected officials at the local level, because that is really what we need to see for federal change, is that we need the district offices to be letting the D.C. offices know that people in the community, voters especially in the community, want to see a federal policy that steps back and lets the states regulate medical cannabis.
And how can people
check that out at americansforsafeaccess.org.
All right. So if they go to americansforsafeaccess.org, they will be able to download the white paper that was just published?
That's right. It's called Third Time's a Charm.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. Also, this week in the news, we lost a great medical marijuana warrior.
Supporter.
His name was Peter Lewis. He was, I think, the chairman of Progressive Insurance. And donated, gave lots of money, and really was a true supporter, understood the issue for medical marijuana, and it's a great loss that we have with him, and we just wanted to give a shout out to him and all the people that cared about him before we said goodbye this week. And at this point, I'd just like to thank Dave Hodges for coming in. Really great to talk to you about mclear at mclear.us. Please go to the website. And if you can memorize what that means, please send me a text. But thank you very much for coming today. Sam, thanks for coming to the studio and being here. Don, thanks for being in Sacramento. Bye-bye, pura vida. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.